Hello guys, welcome back to my second episode, How to Become a Top 1% Destroyer Captain. This series aims at new players and in the later episodes also at intermediate and advanced players to give you some tips and tricks and especially explain the basics about everything you need to know to handle a destroyer in a way that you can consistently outperform the average player. Today we will be focusing on the very basics. After in episode 1 you have learned everything about the commander system, you now should have chosen your favorite commanders and hopefully you followed my recommendation. So either you're ready to equip a gunboat or a torpedo boat with a captain and some, let's say, basic inspirations. And now you question yourself, okay, how to start now, and what about all these map layout? What about all the basics? So can you please explain how that works? Okay, this is what we will do right now. Make sure that you installed all the modules you unlocked already. For each ship. With XP progression, you are able to install additional modules. So finally, you will bring the destroyer to a so-called elite status, generating elite XP. They are basically only used to level up to the next tier level, so you will be able to unlock the next tier level. After that, you reach the next tier level. They form into elite XP before they are just XP. And once they're elite XP, you can purchase doubloons and transfer them from doubloons to global XP, and global XP can be used to level up commanders or ships or go to the store and buy ships for global XP. My personal recommendation is I never changed anything, any elite XP into global XP, because while playing you get enough global XP and it's simply not worth to do the exchange. It's very expensive and it's cheaper to just directly buy anything in the store for doubloons than buying global XP. But that's totally up to you. I'm just explaining what elite XP is for, and in my opinion it's pretty useless once you have leveled up a ship. Next to modules, you can install boosters and flags to a ship. And while the flags are just cosmetic, the boosters, they do have an effect. So there is XP booster, there is Captain XP booster, there is Global XP booster, there is Credit booster, and there is Battle booster. And I suggest at least you fit also in AI games, you fit the Battle booster, because the basic Battle booster gives you a 3% speed boost, which is absolutely essential. And the higher the tier of the booster, you get additional benefits. So the second level gives you a faster consumable reload, and the elite booster gives you a better range of your main guns on top. But I rarely use the elite booster. I use them in ranked or arena games, but not in standard. In standard, I stick to the basic or medium battle boosters. As for the boosters, I would use them on premium ships preferred, because they have a 50% income bonus on all of that. So also then make sure you only use them on the daily wins, because that gives another 50% bonus on everything. Don't waste them in AI. It's totally not worth them to use them in AI. And also don't use them on a ship which doesn't have the daily first win bonus. Because you want to make use of that. And again, preferred to be used on premium ships if you already managed to get some hands on premium ships. Before you enter the battle, make sure you understand the statistics of the consumables you can use during the battle. So the smoke duration and what is the reload time. For example, here we have two smokes lasting 77 seconds, and there are other destroyers who have six smokes lasting only 40 seconds, and they have a faster reload. So you need to make sure what your ship is capable during battle to maximize the output. The same goes for the speed boost. We have an 8% increase of speed here in the Japanese destroyer. The French, for example, they have a 20% increase. So each nation has different consumables, and make sure you understand which consumables your ship has before you take it into battle. I also did always check the captain setup, because unfortunately you cannot save a configuration per ship, but the configuration of the captain is saved only for the captain. So any ship you equip this captain on will run the configuration you used the last time with the last ship. So make sure you adjust it for the current ship. You might want use different perks. It's free of charge to change the perks. It's not free of charge to change the inspirations. So make sure you have one captain set up with the optimized inspiration. But you can change the perks per game and per different destroyer. So make sure you check this before you enter the battle. So after so much theory, it's about time to talk about the battles themselves. So when I start a battle, I immediately have a look at the ship composition of the red enemy team, because you have to understand what you will be up against. So you want to find out how many destroyers, which sort of destroyers, are they gunboats, are they concealment boats, do we have sonar ships there, do we have radar ships, what are the biggest threats? Forget about the patches, but check the ships, and from the knowledge about their stats, you can somewhat evaluate how to play this game, if you have to be careful, if you can be aggressive, and so on and so forth. The next thing what you can check, if you forgot to check the stats beforehand, then there is a button on your console which you can press in game to bring up the basic concealment stats and the range stats of your ship, in this case of a destroyer. So you have the concealment air and sea, and you have the range of the weapons and so on. So you can have a quick look. So it's very important that you understand what your ship is able to do before you enter the battle. So now it's time to enter some battles, and for this tutorial I encourage you to stay in AI. I'm a huge fan of telling people don't stay in AI, go into standard and learn to play against players. But since we're considering you pretty new to the game, and I consider you being new the first 100, 300 games, something like that, you should practice in AI, in low tier, the very basics. And what I mean by practicing the basics? Well, the basics for destroyer pilot are not to torpedo a ship on 10-kilometer range or a gun on 10-kilometer range. Let us compare it like you get your driver's license. What the teacher is teaching you is not to go as fast as you can on the highway. They teach you about emergency situations. And what is the emergency situation you can get into with a destroyer? The emergency situation is when your concealment is unconcealed and you're spotted. Because then action becomes very dense and tight, and usually you're very close to an enemy, usually within 5 or 6 kilometers. You have several people shooting at you. You need to identify targets, you need to shoot torpedoes, you need to shoot your guns, you have to be prepared beforehand, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to teach you today is practice these emergency situations over and over again. They will not be your standard approach in every game, but they will help you out and keep you alive more often than once if you are an expert in these heated action situations. But before we take a closer look to tactics in close combat, let's analyze the game screen here. On the top, you have the team composition, the different classes, destroyer, cruiser, and battleships, from large to big. You have the game counter. Make sure every game is maximum 15 minutes, and the game is won by the team who destroyed the other team or who won by points. And where you have the game counter on top, there are the points displayed per team. And once a team reaches 1,000, the game ends. Or if the enemy reaches 0 points, so they lost all their points because many ships have been destroyed and they didn't acclaim new points, then the enemy team lost the game as well. So those are the win conditions. So you're getting points by destroying other ships, and you're getting points per second or per 5 or 10 seconds if you kept the bases. So these are the areas marked with the letters A, B, C. So blue areas are your owned areas, and they will accumulate points per every couple of seconds, and the red ones will accumulate points for the enemy team, while the gray one is not owned by anybody. If the square is 45 degrees turned around, then it's so-called contested, and nobody gets points for this one because there's an enemy ship and an own ship in that area, and unless it's free of enemy ships, nobody will accumulate points. So it's an integral part of destroyer play to contest captures and to capture these areas for your team, because you can sneak in concealed, or you smoke up and stay and defend them against enemy destroyers, kill enemy destroyers, spot them, and so on and so forth. The small number next to the minimap is your concealment. So this is very useful if you're changing ships very often. It permanently shows you your current in-game concealment. And you will notice this is going to change. So once you're spotted because you fired your guns, this may increase to your gun range, which is like 10, 11 kilometers. So firing your guns will reveal your position to any ship within your gun range. So if you're firing at a 10-kilometer ship, despite being concealed 4.5 kilometer in this case, your concealment will immediately be increased to your gun range, let's say 11 kilometers. And every enemy ship within 11 kilometers can spot you, and every ship on the map which can reach you can shoot at you. So this is very important to understand, not to shoot your guns unless you really decide to shoot your guns, because you will lose your concealment in the very moment. On the top left of the screen, you have your ship data and the consumables, so your HP points, your ship you're driving, the ship name, then from left to right is the damage control. If you activate that, you have unlimited damage controls, but you have a cooldown here. If you activate that, you can extinguish any fire. And once you activated that, for 5 or 10 seconds, the enemy cannot ignite a new fire because it prevents new fires to be ignited. But once it's on cooldown, of course, you can be ignited by enemy fires. So namely by HE ammunition, which is the ammunition you can see on the right-hand side with the flame. Opposite to AP ammunition, if you press the square, you change the ammunition and reload the guns. And with AP, armor piercing, you cannot ignite fires at enemy ships, but you do a specific damage, and you need that ammunition, being a destroyer captain, especially against broadsiding cruisers and some broadsiding destroyers, and also against battleship superstructure, where you can deal a lot of damage. You cannot deal damage to broadsiding battleships or bow tanking cruisers and battleships with AP. You would then use the HE ammunition, so the one with the fire on it. So being a destroyer pilot, most of the time you use HE, and this is a good starting point to only use HE for a start, unless you practice a little bit when and how you can hit with AP. And this brings me to my recommendation, back to my recommendation, why you should start in AI, because this is the place to practice. You practice the aiming points, you practice the efficiency of ammunition, whom you can damage for how much. It's not important to win in AI. Usually you cannot lose in AI. I played like 900 games in AI and I probably lost 4. But I basically get killed in every game pretty soon because I basically just YOLO these games. So I go in, release my torpedoes, killed 1, 2, 3 ships, and my team is also taking care. So I even carry the games most of the time, but I don't aim to survive. So don't worry to survive AI games. They're just a training ground, and you need to perfectionize the close quarter combat here. So let's kick off the game. In AI, the enemy is just moving straight forward into you. No normal player would do that, no standard player, but this is very good to practice the situation I described in the beginning of this tutorial. You will face a group of 3 ships and you just rush into them. The AI isn't aiming too well, and they are turning some angles, some unpredicted moves, but that's about it. You can die from that, of course, but the aim is now to perfectionize the battle against these 3 ships, so that you are really confident that you can bring down the enemy destroyer very quickly, also the cruiser, and later on the battleship, and kill as many of the 3 as possible. So if you're confident killing your spawn here on a regular basis in every game, I would say then you have mastered the first level of close quarter combats. And if you're in standard and if your concealment goes down and you have to fight only 1 or 2 enemy ships, you're used to fast reactions, to target selection, and you're not so much focused on how to handle your ship anymore because you practice this in AI. So this is what we are going to do now. I will teach you now how to close quarter combat. So my first tip here is always use the torpedo selection and the aim prediction for the torpedo on a target you're interested in, because it shows you where this target is going to turn, if it's going to slow down, to speed up. You will see immediately what the ship is doing. So this is your best prediction. It's much harder to guess what a ship is doing if you don't have a lock on it, and if you just aim with guns on it, then if you use the torpedo aim prediction. So this is a big advantage of destroyers. You can predict where the ships will be moving. Just if you press the slow down button, you will immediately see the aim prediction adjusting. Understand the aim prediction is not 100% guaranteed to hit that area, but it's pretty close. So the longer the range, the greater the chance you're going to miss the torpedoes. So you don't want to torp long range. You want to get as close to your concealment level, namely in this ship like 5 kilometers as possible. Still, I'm dropping some torps here, long range, because I'm using the time for the reload. So if you have a fast reload, it could make sense if you have long range torpedoes to fire them early on a blind spot, where usually ships show up in a standard game, just to prevent them and to get some accidental hit on the enemy. Sometimes you score some hits, but don't do that on a 2-minute reload torpedo, because it takes about 60 seconds to get into a battle position in a standard game. And if you do that with 2-minute reloads, you will have 60 seconds while you run into an enemy destroyers, and your torpedoes won't be available. So I suggest blind fire only on fast reload torpedoes. If you're fighting an enemy destroyer, my general tactic is to use torpedoes as a distraction, because if an enemy destroyer is confronted to avoid incoming torpedoes, he doesn't have time to use his guns, or only some of his guns, because he's nose in. So they are not usually meant to really hit the target, but more to distract them. So I usually in close combat I use them widespread, not narrow spread. They are more avoidable, but they make sure if the enemy destroyer slows down or speeds up, it's a greater chance to cover the area and to keep shooting while he needs to turn. So that's why I fired some blind torpedoes on the battleship in the background, but also in the direction of the destroyer. So now we spotted the T-22 here, and this is the aim I'm using. So let's have a quick talk about the aiming system here in the game. The red arrow is the time your bullets will fly to the enemy ship, and the green arrow, the right number, is the distance to the enemy ship. For what I use is the fly time, and you have this scale on the screen. The center is the aim point, and to the left and the right there are these markers. And I use these markers in a combination with the flight time. And I have a rule of thumb. So, given this T-22 will be fully broadside, going from left to right, I give it 1 vertical mark for every 2 seconds flight time. So this is for a full speed destroyer. So if you assume the destroyer is going from left to right full speed, and the flight time is about 2 or 2.5 seconds, I would aim ahead about 1 mark. If the flight time would be 4 seconds, I would aim ahead 2 marks. If it's 6 seconds, I would aim ahead 3 marks. For cruisers, I aim 1 mark per every 3 seconds of flight times, and for battleship 1 mark for every 4 seconds. So that's my rule of thumb. 2 for a destroyer, 3 seconds for a cruiser, and 4 for a battleship. Again, for a broad-sailing left to right or right to left sailing ship. If the ship, like this T-22 here, is coming in about 45-degree angle towards us, you need to halve that. So it's 1 mark for every 4-second destroyer, and for a battleship it would be 8 seconds flight time for 1 mark. So that gives you quite a good idea of where to aim if you hit the ship. If you go with this, I'm sitting at a bullet hit ratio of about 50%. So I think the rule of thumb works quite well. And you might try it out if you haven't yet figured this out or have your own system, but it works very well for me. While we are shooting, we have deployed our smoke. We are still on engine boost, and we are playing with the throttle, so we hit the brakes and we're going back because we expect incoming torpedoes. Then we're moving forward again just to avoid them. And if you expect torpedoes, you can either turn into them or turn out of them. So in that angle, I decided to turn into them because I expected them to come from the front right side. So we tried to avoid them. Again, the AI is not that professional. Yeah, but we moved on. So next, we don't care for the destroyer for the moment, but we're trying to torp the Dane here, and at a later time come back to the destroyer. You can do it like you want, but I'm focusing on the cruiser and on the battleship as well. So I'm selecting different targets here, and we just move on with the destroyer in this game. To be honest, I wasn't aware that the Mutsuki has such slow turning and bad guns. I was pretty confident I can gun a little bit better against this T-22, but I don't play tier 4 and tier 3 all too often, so I wasn't aware, and I just collected some footage here. But as you can see, we sunk the cruiser, and now we're doing a suicide run on the König. And you usually do this as close as possible, but make sure you stay inside the wide area, because if you're too close to your destroyer, where there's no wide area when you have the aim prediction, the torpedoes don't aim, and you can fire as many torpedoes on a ship inside that uncolored area. You won't do any damage because they won't arm. They won't arm, not aim. So they just move under the ship, and nothing will happen. So make sure you stay in the wide area. And if the area is orange, your torpedoes are on reload or they are too far out. So this tells you if you're ready to shoot or not. And you can see I'm trying to use a wide shot here because I wanted to make sure we get the König down and at the same time get a shot on the T-22 using some guns. But in this case, okay, the 22 kills me. We damage his engine, but look at the ship count. We are 6 versus 3, so no doubt about this game was won. Now to another game. This game is in a German destroyer, and I just want to show you that every destroyer has its own strengths and weaknesses. And the German, for example, this one has very specific torpedo angles and very different torpedo setups. So it can fire at these various angles I just showed here, and there are different setups. So you have a single torpedo to the front and a double torpedo with turning torpedo launchers in the center and to the back. So you need to know and understand your torpedo angles, and every destroyer has different angles. And the more forward facing they are, the more advantageous the destroyer is in a destroyer fight. Or in a suicidal run, because if you suicide other ships close range, then you want to drive as fast as possible nose in. So the more forward facing the torpedoes go, the better. This game is about to show an approach against multiple targets, and a big let's say something what people do who are less experienced is they usually drop all torpedoes at one target. So they have one target here, for example this one, and they drop all their, let's say 3 times 3 torpedoes on one ship. Oftentimes you don't need as many torpedoes to sink a ship, but you could hold back one set of torpedoes, for example. To continue in this battle, we're smoking up, we are reversing. This is the next tip: never sit and smoke still. And if there is a sonar or radar around, never sit there all too long. Be prepared that you're radared and or sonared. And while they can see you, if you're in smoke and you don't have sonar yourself, you don't see them. So you're basically dead then. So in this game I focus on killing the destroyers. You should always focus on killing destroyers because they are your main enemy, unless a cruiser is pretty close. Unfortunately here the cruiser takes my torpedoes. I was aiming at their cruiser. The idea was to torpedo the cruiser and to shoot the destroyer. So this is what I meant by fighting multiple targets at one time. You want to aim the torpedoes at one target and you want to shoot another target. And we repeat this again. The wide area is reloaded torpedoes, but those are single. So I'm using the single torpedoes. Unfortunately the cruiser makes a little turn, so again I adjust. I have another torpedo ready. And in tier 3 they don't need too much. So and then again I switch to the other target and release my torpedoes over here. And again on the other set, on the second destroyer. So I make sure I kill these 2 guys, and yeah, they killed me, but I took away 3 ships, and for an AI game this is perfectly fine. The next game is playing a gunboat. We're playing the American destroyer here, and this is a gunboat configuration with Halsey. So the focus on this ship is the American ships. They usually have long-lasting smoke. They have pretty good torpedoes, but a very slow torpedo reload rate. The Clemson is a bit different. You have 2 sets to each side, so 3 torpedoes. So it's 4 sets, 2 times 3 to each side, which means you can fire 2 times 3 to the right, 2 times 3 to the left. You need to understand what your destroyer is capable of doing, and especially this destroyer is perfect for YOLOing, because you can just go in between the enemy lines here and fire some torpedoes to the right and some to the left. It plays similar to the destroyer you will meet later once you're advanced a little bit further, because the French destroyer, they have a similar layout. They have usually torpedo launchers to one side only and then another one to the other one. The advantage is that the torpedo launchers don't have to turn 180 degrees, but they are immediately available. So if you're confronted by 2 ships, one left, one right, you just go into the center and almost simultaneously launch left and right. As said earlier, you want to hold back your torpedoes as long as possible, because you need to make sure that the enemy has as few chances to change the course as possible. So we're opening up the fire with the guns on the destroyer, and then again we want to torp, of course, the destroyer and the cruiser. So we're aiming at the destroyer, but also a bit at the cruiser in the background. As you can see on the minimap, there are a lot of red targets now, so things heat up very much now, and this is what I meant by learning how to close combat. So we're shooting the destroyer, we're torpedoing the cruiser on the right, and we are torpedoing the battleship on the left. And then we're going back to the right. And now watch, I was using HE, so the fire igniting ammunition, and now I'm switching to AP, armor piercing ammunition, because this emerald is broadside within 3 kilometers, and that means I can citadel his citadel. So if you're aiming at little bit, let's say at the end of the first third of the ship, and you fire your guns, you're pretty sure that you get some citadels here. So this is the aiming point. And you see the flight time is just a fraction of a second. So you hit the center and you hit slightly above waterline, and you see I fired 1 salvo and I got 6 citadels. So unfortunately, one of my teammates kills the ship, but the next ship would be deadly. So my lesson here is, don't be afraid of using AP against cruisers if you're within 4 or 3 kilometers, because most of the time you can citadel them and you're a big threat to them. And most players don't know that, and they don't use it. And you can see at the same time my torpedoes hit the König. So we're now focusing on the König. We're making a right turn because we want to utilize the smoke and to get out of his line of sight. Unfortunately, there's a plane as well spotting us, because we have a carrier here. So it didn't really work out to get out of his line of sight. Just now we're not spotted anymore. You see the spotting icon is gone, but there it is again. And then we have the torpedoes back, so we see that the König is turning to the right, so we're releasing our torpedoes and try to finish him off. But at the end we are being killed. Still, this doesn't matter, because it brings us to another destroyer tactic, which is the flooding, the blue ribbon you just saw appearing. The König already has used his damage control, and you can trigger that with igniting fires, and usually if you have 2 fires on the ship, the players will use the damage control to extinguish them. And once they don't have a damage control and you trigger a flood, the flooding does a huge amount of damage, and it eventually might kill the ships. So your aim is always to trigger the flood or the fire. So we want to take the damage control out of game, and then we want to trigger fire and flood. So my summary for episode 2 is, please practice in AI the close combat. Rush in, choose multiple targets while you're rushing in. Try to shoot the destroyer, try to torp the cruiser, which is the biggest threat for the destroyers usually. And then if time is left, take your time to kill the battleship. And if you do this a couple of times, then you can be confident that you can handle a stressy situation in a standard game. But you need to understand your destroyer, your turret traverse, your torpedo angles, your reload time, the damage your torpedoes do to certain ships, from which angles you can citadel cruisers, and so on. You should especially practice to citadel cruisers, because this is an essential part for destroyers. If you manage to do that, you're ahead of 90% of the destroyer players out there already, because most of them, they just rely on torpedoes and they have no clue how to citadel a cruiser, and most of them even don't know. And that is why we do this tutorial here. It's a very good option for destroyer if you have the right moment and the right situation, and you can bring yourself into that situation, so you can really citadel these cruisers. So please practice this in AI, and then we will see at episode 3 when we come to standard games. Looking forward to see you, and thanks for following me, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and leave your comments, and see you out there. Bye bye.